Okay, so here we are. This is the part of a project I really enjoy. In the previous video, we created this rough sketch, which I've now imported from the iPad straight into Illustrator CC. So I hope you can follow along, and we're going to assume in this video you're at least fairly familiar with Illustrator. I'll point out any specific tips or tools I'm using that might be of benefit. But there's lots of other classes that will help orient you with Illustrator and show you how to use it for logo design. So I'm not going to kind of repeat the basics here. But here we are in Illustrator. I've created a few artboards. I like to create just some dot grids and basic borders for me to work within, and I have those as locked layers. So if you're wondering why your artboard looks different to mine, that would be why. But from this starting point, in this video we're going to cover setting up the logo type and the fonts so that we're happy with them. So if you look at the sketch here, we kind of imagined some kind of classy serif here. This is a luxury Paris and London based interior design brand. So a nice classy serif, and then perhaps we compare that with a something that says we're luxury but we're also modern, so maybe a sans serif tagline. But let's start off with the basics, and I'll show you my technique for making this work and for kind of quickly exploring the options when we're looking at logo type for a luxury brand. So I'm going to show you what I arrive at first. This is what I've gone for. I think that's very strong. It's got a perfect balance between classic and modern, and it screams luxury and high-end. But let's start from the basics, and I'll walk you through the techniques I would use to arrive at that. So here we are, right down to the absolute basics. So we've got the brand name, the tagline, but there's no kind of tweaking or customization at all. So the font is Arial, the size is the same, the tracking is 0, there's really no customization here at all, but you can see how stunning it looks when we begin to add some elements of contrast, some custom tracking. So from this, I would usually begin just with the fonts, but before that, get the sizing and the contrast to something that's going to give me an indication of whether this is what I'm looking for. So again, speed over precision at this stage, and we can tidy things up later. So I'm using a shortcut, Option Shift and dragging, so that I can just freely drag with constraints in place. I'm going to make the brand name much bigger than the tagline. The tagline, the same shortcut, Option Shift. I'm going to shrink that down. And I should say this needs to be while you have the selection tool at the ready. So you click with the selection tool, and you can use that shortcut to quickly, just drag and resize elements and see how they're looking. Now actually that's not half bad, and there is a very popular high-end brand that used a very similar font to this, but it's not really the vibe I'm looking for. So first I'm going to increase the spacing. I think this looks a little crowded at the bottom here, and I think it's a pleasing way to distinguish the tagline from the main logo type, to make sure it's looked at second. And we looked at sequence of cognition in a previous video. This kind of ensures the first word you see is 100% going to be the brand name, Model, and then because we've increased that spacing, this now becomes the secondary element. It's much softer. Your eyes are going to view it second in sequence. So already that's quite good. I'm going to change the font for the tagline, and my way of let me show you this I guess from scratch, because I already know what I'm aiming for, but to take you through the process, when we're just exploring what works. So with that selection tool, you hold down Option and drag, and you can duplicate as many times as you want. So once I've duplicated kind of a base version, I just run through the fonts. And in Illustrator, it's really useful. I'll do it at the top so that it remains on screen, and you can see as you look through your font library, you get this really helpful preview to the right. So at a glance, you might be able to see you know, what you feel works and what doesn't. But usually you have some go-to fonts. For me, there's a few I usually go to. So we're looking at a serif for the main brand name. Budoni is quite good. Let's see how that looks. That's quite classy, and that's got an almost Parisian look to it. So that's actually very strong. We'll save that one. And on this version for the tagline, again, I'm just going to scroll through fonts. And I mean, Arial's just a little bit default system font. So maybe Avignon. Let's try a medium. Yeah, that's quite nice. It's got, I guess, squarer, blockier edges to it. It's a little wider profiled than Arial. So I like that. That looks really strong as it is. Let's duplicate it again. And basically repeat this process. And if you're not sure, if you're not happy with the, I quite like the contrast here and the basic layout. But you could always, for each iteration, you could play with that. So for example, you could shrink the size down and increase the tracking for the main brand name. So a little less contrast in the spacing now between the main brand and the tagline. Or you could further increase the tracking for the brand line. You could even try, I've just realized this is no longer centered, so let's drag that back. You could even try something like this where it's more or less flush. And of course in your final version you'd get that perfectly flush with a brand line above. So you can try some variations, see what's working best for you. You can try a variation where the fonts are the same, you're just changing the contrast, and have fun with this. For me, this is, you know, this is one of the design stages where something will really jump out at you. I'm going to jump straight to another of my go-to fonts, Trajan Pro 3. It's kind of a classic with a modern twist, and I really love it. There's rarely a brand, you know, it doesn't look fabulous on straight away. So see what works best for the project. And obviously this is an imaginary client. If you're working with a real client, you know, you're weighing up the brand values, you're weighing up the intended brand voice, and you've got other factors like that. But for us here, we're just having fun, and this is a portfolio piece. So I'm going to duplicate that. That's quite nice. I think maybe Gotham. Let's try Gotham for the font at the bottom. And so just another tip, if your tagline's too light, so this looks quite cool, let's go for Gotham Light, and let's shrink it even further. Now at this screen size, I'm going to reduce the tracking there. That looks quite cool, but it's not practical. If you zoom out, it's just illegible. If you compare this to the other versions, you simply can't read the tagline at this side. Now, if the tagline was kind of an optional secondary element, and you know, you didn't need a client to be able to read the tagline, perhaps you could make that compromise. But for this project, let's say you really need that tagline to be sufficiently legible. So let's go back. Medium is perhaps overcooking it, but let's try book and just enlarge that, and that's quite nice. So hopefully that shows you my technique for font exploration. Once you've arrived at something you're happy with, and I did this earlier here, we drag it across to the right. I sometimes like to never work in color at this stage, always black and white, but I sometimes like to pick a dark gray as opposed to black, so it's a little softer, especially if I envisage the final identity using something a little softer, a little less stark, then that's quite useful. So working grey, not just black and white, and that can kind of help you gauge the final impact this is going to have. So for the core of the brand, I think we'll look at that in a future video, but for now we've arrived at a logo type that I'm really happy with. So for now, let's leave it there and we'll move on to the next video.